The knock came just after midnight, 3 sharp raps that cut through the howling storm like gunshots, and Yates Garrett nearly dropped the whiskey bottle he had been nursing by the fireplace of his small ranch house outside Sierra City, California. He was not accustomed to visitors at any hour, much less during a spring storm that had turned the dusty roads into rivers of mud. It was April of 1876, and the 40 acres he had carved out of the Sierra Nevada foothills felt like the edge of the world on nights like this. The knocking came again, more urgent this time, followed by a sound that made his chest tighten. A woman's voice, barely audible over the thunder, calling out for help. Yates set down his bottle and crossed the room in 4 long strides, his heart pounding harder than it had any right to. He grabbed his rifle from above the door out of habit, though something told him this was not that kind of trouble. When he pulled open the heavy wooden door, the wind nearly tore it from his hands. Standing on his porch, illuminated by the weak lamplight spilling from his cabin, was a young woman who looked like she had been dragged through hell backward. Her dark hair hung in soaked ropes around her face, her dress was plastered to her thin frame, and she was shivering so violently that her teeth chattered audibly even over the storm. Blood mixed with rainwater ran from a gash on her forehead, and her eyes, wide and green as spring grass, held a terror that made Yates forget every rule he had ever set for himself about minding his own business. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth. "Please, I need help." Yates did not hesitate. He leaned the rifle against the wall and stripped off his heavy wool coat, the one his mother had sent him from Missouri before she passed, and draped it around the woman's shoulders. It swallowed her whole, and she clutched it with white-knuckled fingers. "Get inside," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. He took her elbow gently and guided her over the threshold, kicking the door shut against the storm. "You are freezing half to death. Come on by the fire." She stumbled as he led her across the room, and he caught her easily, surprised by how light she was. He settled her into his only chair, pulling it as close to the hearth as he dared, then grabbed a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders on top of his coat. She was still shaking, still looking at him with those terrified eyes, and Yates felt something shift in his chest that he had not felt in the 6 years since he had come west to escape his past. "I am going to get you some water and clean that cut," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You are safe here. Whatever you are running from, it is not getting through that door. Do you understand?" She nodded once, a jerky movement, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. Up close, even drenched and terrified, she was striking. High cheekbones, full lips, skin pale beneath the dirt and blood. Young, too. Early 20s, he guessed, though the fear in her eyes made her look younger still. Yates moved to the small kitchen area, pumping water into a basin and grabbing a clean cloth from his meager supply. He was not accustomed to tending to anyone but himself, but his mother had raised him right before consumption took her. He knew how to clean a wound, how to make a body comfortable. He brought the basin back to the fire and knelt beside the chair, dipping the cloth in the cool water. "This might sting," he warned, then gently began cleaning the blood from her face. She flinched but did not pull away, and he worked as carefully as he could. The gash was not deep, thank God, just a split in the skin above her left eyebrow. It would heal clean if he bandaged it properly. "What is your name?" he asked as he worked, trying to keep her focused on something besides whatever horror had driven her out into the storm. "Mariana," she whispered. "Mariana Keene." "I am Yates Garrett. This is my ranch, such as it is. You are about 5 miles outside Sierra City." He rinsed the cloth and dabbed at the cut again. "Can you tell me what happened? Who hurt you?" Her whole body went rigid, and for a moment he thought she might bolt. Then her shoulders sagged, and a sob escaped her lips that broke something inside him he had thought long dead. "My stepfather," she said, and the words came out strangled. "He tried to force me. He has been trying for months, ever since my mother died last winter. Tonight he was drunk and he would not take no for an answer, so I fought him. I hit him with a lamp and I ran. I just ran and I did not stop running until I saw your light." Rage, white-hot and consuming, flooded through Yates. He had seen plenty of evil in his 31 years, had done things during the war he was not proud of, but there was a special kind of rot in a man who would harm his own family. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to keep his hands gentle as he finished cleaning her wound. "He will not touch you again," Yates said, and his voice came out harder than he intended. "I give you my word on that." Mariana looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something like hope flicker in her eyes. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." He set the cloth aside and reached for the strip of clean linen he kept for emergencies. "No woman deserves what he tried to do. And no person gets turned away from my door in a storm, especially not when they are bleeding." He tied the bandage carefully around her head, then sat back on his heels. "When did you last eat?" She shook her head. "Yesterday morning, maybe. I am not sure." Yates stood and moved to his larder, pulling out bread, cheese, and some dried beef. It was simple fare, but it was what he had. He poured her a cup of water from the pump and brought it all to her on a plate. "Eat slowly. Your stomach is probably tied in knots." Mariana took the plate with shaking hands and ate like someone who had forgotten what food tasted like. Yates busied himself adding wood to the fire, giving her space and privacy for this small dignity. Outside, the storm continued to rage, thunder rolling across the foothills like distant cannon fire. He found himself grateful for it. If her stepfather was fool enough to come looking, the storm would slow him down considerably. When she had finished eating, some color had returned to her cheeks. She was still wearing his coat and the blanket, and she looked impossibly small wrapped in both. Yates pulled his other chair closer to the fire and sat down, giving her space but staying close enough that she would know she was not alone. "I am sorry," Mariana said softly. "I did not know where else to go. I was just running and I saw your light and I thought maybe someone might help me. I had no right to impose on you like this." "You had every right," Yates said firmly, "and you are not imposing. I have plenty of room, as you can see." He gestured to the small cabin with a wry smile. It was not much, just one large room with his bed in the corner, a table and chairs, the fireplace, and his few belongings scattered about. But it was clean and it was dry and it was his. "Where will you sleep?" she asked, suddenly realizing the situation. "I will take the floor by the fire. You take the bed. And before you argue, that is how it is going to be. You have been through enough tonight without sleeping on hard wood." Mariana looked like she wanted to protest, but exhaustion was winning the battle. Her eyelids were drooping and she swayed slightly in her chair. Yates stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, let us get you settled before you fall over." She took his hand, her fingers small and cold in his, and let him guide her to the bed. He pulled back the quilts his mother had made and helped her settle in, boots and all, since he did not want to presume. She sank into the mattress like she had not felt anything soft in months, and maybe she had not. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes already closing. "Thank you for being kind." Yates felt his throat tighten. "Try to sleep. You are safe here." Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of exhausted sleep. Yates stood watching her for a moment, this stranger who had crashed into his life like a bolt of lightning, then turned and made himself a pallet by the fire. He did not sleep, though. He kept his rifle close and listened to the storm, his mind racing with thoughts of what the morning would bring. He had told her she was safe, and he meant it. Whatever it took, He would make sure of that, even if it meant going up against the whole town of Sierra City, even if it meant turning his carefully ordered life completely upside down. Something had shifted the moment he opened that door, and Yates Garrett was enough of a realist to know that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The storm blew itself out sometime before dawn, leaving the world washed clean and dripping. Yates had dozed fitfully, waking at every small sound, his hand always close to his rifle. When the first gray light began seeping through the windows, he rose quietly and stepped outside to survey the damage. His small barn had weathered the storm well enough, and he could hear his 2 horses moving restlessly in their stalls. The chickens were making a fuss in their coop, demanding their breakfast. The creek that ran along the edge of his property had swollen to twice its normal size, brown water churning over the rocks. Everything smelled of wet earth and pine, clean and fresh, as if the world had been given permission to start over. He was standing on the porch, watching the sun paint the clouds gold and pink, when he heard her moving inside. He gave her a few minutes of privacy before heading back in, stomping his boots at the door to announce his presence. Mariana was sitting on the edge of the bed, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly. She was beautiful, there was no denying that, with fine features and those striking green eyes. But there was a wariness in the set of her shoulders, a readiness to bolt that spoke of hard experience. She looked up as he entered, and he saw her relax slightly when she recognized him. "Morning," Yates said. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," she admitted. "And a bit foolish in the light of day. I am sure you have questions." "I have questions," he agreed, moving to the stove to start coffee. "But they can wait until you have something warm in you. Coffee all right?" Coffee would be wonderful. He went about making breakfast, aware of her watching him as he moved around the small space. He fried eggs and bacon, sliced more bread, and when the coffee was ready he poured 2 cups and brought everything to the table. Mariana rose slowly, still wrapped in his coat, and joined him. They ate in silence for a few minutes, both hungry, both aware of the conversation that needed to happen. Finally, Mariana set down her fork and looked at him directly. "My stepfather is Jacob Keene. He runs the general store in Sierra City. Everyone thinks he is a good man, a pillar of the community. My mother married him 3 years ago after my father died. I think she was just lonely and scared of being alone. I was 19 and too young to know how to stop her." Yates knew the store, had bought supplies there a few times. He tried to recall the owner but came up with only a vague impression of a middle-aged man with a ready smile. "Go on." "He was fine at first, kind even, but after my mother got sick, things changed. He started looking at me differently, saying things that made my skin crawl. After she died in January, he told me I would need to earn my keep, that I owed him for the years of food and shelter." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook around her coffee cup. "Last night he came into my room drunk and tried to force himself on me. I had been sleeping with a knife under my pillow for weeks, expecting something like this. But in the moment, I grabbed the lamp instead and hit him. I did not wait to see if I had knocked him out or killed him. I just ran." "You did the right thing," Yates said firmly. "Did anyone see you leave town?" "I do not think so. It was already storming and everyone was inside. I ran through the back ways, through the alleys, and then out along the road. I fell twice in the mud, lost my shawl somewhere. Then I saw your light and thought maybe God had not completely abandoned me." Yates took a long drink of his coffee, thinking, "He is going to come looking for you. If you hurt him, he will use that as an excuse, make you out to be the villain. Men like that always do." "I know," she said quietly. "I have been thinking about it all morning. I need to leave, go somewhere far from here. Maybe San Francisco or even farther, but I have no money, no horse, nothing but the clothes on my back." She looked down at herself ruefully. "And even those are ruined." "You are not going anywhere alone," Yates said, and the words were out of his mouth before he had fully thought them through. But once he said them, he knew they were right. "It is too dangerous. A woman traveling alone, no money, no protection. You would not make it 20 miles. Mariana looked at him with those wide green eyes. "I cannot ask you to help me more than you already have. You have done so much already." "You are not asking. I am offering." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. "Look, I know we just met. I know you have no reason to trust me beyond the fact that I did not take advantage of you last night. But I mean what I say. I can help you get somewhere safe, help you start over." "Why?" she asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Yates was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. "6 years ago, I left Missouri because I did things during the war I am not proud of. I rode with some bad men, made choices I wish I could take back. I came out here to get away from all that, to try to be better. Most days I feel like I am just marking time, waiting for something I cannot name. Then you knocked on my door last night, and I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is my chance to do something right, to be the man my mother raised me to be before the war turned me into something else." He met her eyes across the table. "I am not asking for anything from you. I am not looking for gratitude or payment or anything else. I'm just offering help because it is the right thing to do. What you do with that offer is up to you." Mariana was quiet for a long moment, studying him like she was trying to read the truth written on his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Then I accept. Thank you, Yates, truly." "Good," he said, feeling something settle in his chest. "Now we need to figure out our next steps. First thing, you need proper clothes. That dress is ruined and you cannot travel in it anyway. I have some old shirts and pants that might fit you if we cinch them up. You will pass better as a boy if anyone asks questions. You think we need to run. I think we need to be smart. Let me ride into town this morning, see what the situation is. If your stepfather is stirring up trouble, we will hear about it soon enough. Sierra City is not big enough to keep secrets. While I am gone, you stay here. Do not answer the door for anyone, and if someone does come, you hide in the barn. There is a loose board in the back of the last stall. You can squeeze behind it if you need to." Mariana nodded, and he could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "I will be back before noon. You have my word." "I believe you," she said softly, and he believed she meant it. After breakfast, Yates showed her where everything was, made sure she felt comfortable in the cabin. He changed into his good shirt, strapped on his gun belt out of habit, and saddled his gelding, a sturdy bay named Rusty. Before he mounted, he went back inside and found Mariana sitting by the fire, wearing a pair of his old pants and a shirt that hung off her small frame. She had rolled up the sleeves and legs, and despite everything, she looked almost at ease. "There is stew meat in the larder if you get hungry. Help yourself to anything, and remember, do not answer the door." "I will be fine," she assured him. "Please be careful." The ride into Sierra City took just under an hour. The roads were still muddy from the storm, and Rusty picked his way carefully around the deeper puddles. The town itself was small, maybe 300 people on a good day, nestled in a valley where two creeks met. It had sprung up during the gold rush days and managed to survive after the easy gold was gone, transitioning into a trading post and supply hub for the ranches and farms in the area. Yates tied Rusty outside the saloon, which also served as the informal gathering place for news and gossip. It was still early, but there were a few men inside, nursing coffee and talking in low voices. They looked up when he entered, and Yates nodded a greeting. "Morning, Garrett," said Pete Sullivan, the bartender and owner. "Hell of a storm last night." "That it was," Yates agreed, moving to the bar. "Lost any shingles off the roof?" "A few. Nothing I cannot patch. What brings you into town?" "Needed some supplies. Thought I would check if the general store was open." Something flickered across Pete's face, and the other men exchanged glances. Yates felt his gut tighten. Something wrong. "Depends on who you ask," Pete said carefully. "Jacob Keene is raising hell this morning. Says his stepdaughter attacked him in the night and ran off. He has got Doc Crawford looking at a nasty gash on his head, claiming she tried to kill him." "That right?" Yates kept his voice neutral. "What does the girl say?" "Nobody knows. She is missing. Keene has got half the town out looking for her, saying she is dangerous and disturbed. Says she has been acting strange since her mother died, that he was worried she might hurt herself or someone else." One of the other men, a rancher named Tom Hayes, spoke up. "I do not buy it. I knew Mariana's mother, knew the girl a bit too. She was always quiet and polite, helped out at the church socials. Never struck me as the violent type." "Women can surprise you," another man said, but he sounded uncertain. "What does the sheriff say?" Yates asked. "Sheriff Morrison is out of town, up in Nevada City on some business. Will not be back for a few days." Keene wanted to form a posse, but most folks are saying we should wait for proper law before we go hunting for a scared girl. "Sensible," Yates said. He finished his coffee and stood. "Well, I hope she turns up safe. Storm like that, she could have gotten hurt. Where is your place, Garrett?" Pete asked suddenly. "You are out on the eastern road, right?" "South," Yates lied smoothly. "Other side of Willow Creek. Why?" "Just wondering if you saw anything. Girl could have gone any direction." "Did not see a thing. Storm was too thick to see your hand in front of your face." He tipped his hat. "Gentlemen, I will be on my way. Got work to do." He left before anyone could ask more questions and headed to the general store, more to get a read on Jacob Keene than because he needed anything. The store was open, and Keene was behind the counter, a white bandage wrapped around his head. He looked up when Yates entered, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Help you?" Keene asked. Up close, he was a stocky man in his late 40s with thinning hair and a ruddy complexion. His eyes were small and mean, and Yates felt his dislike harden into something colder. "Heard you had some trouble last night," Yates said, keeping his tone sympathetic. "Your girl all right?" Keene's face twisted. "She is not all right. She is crazy, touched in the head. Attacked me while I was sleeping and ran off into the storm. I am worried sick she is hurt or worse." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Yates almost believed it himself. Almost. But he had seen Mariana's terror, had cleaned the blood from her face and seen the truth in her eyes. This man was a liar and worse, and it took all of Yates's control not to reach across the counter and finish what Mariana had started. "That is terrible," he said instead. "I am sure she will turn up. Storm like that, she probably found shelter somewhere. I hope you are right." Keene leaned forward, and Yates caught a whiff of whiskey even though it was not yet 10 in the morning. "If you see her, if you hear anything, you will let me know. I just want to get her home safe, get her the help she needs." "Of course," Yates said, and the lie tasted like ash in his mouth. "I will keep an eye out." He bought a few supplies he did not need, just to keep up appearances, then headed back to his ranch. The ride back felt twice as long, his mind churning with what he had learned. Keene was smart, painting Mariana as disturbed and dangerous. It was the perfect cover for his own crimes, and it would make it harder for her to defend herself if she was caught. When he got back to the cabin, Mariana was standing on the porch, clearly having been watching for him. The relief on her face when she saw him was palpable. "How bad is it?" she asked as he dismounted. Bad enough, he said grimly. He told her everything he had learned as he unsaddled Rusty and turned him out into the small corral. Mariana listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. He is going to get away with it, she said finally, her voice hollow. Everyone will believe him because he is a respected businessman and I am just some girl. Even if I told the truth, who would believe me? I believe you, Yates said. And we are not going to let him win, but we need to be smart about this. The sheriff will be back in a few days. We need to be gone before then. Where will we go? Yates had been thinking about this during the ride back. I have a friend in Sacramento. We rode together during the war. He owns a hotel now, respectable place. He can give you work, help you get on your feet. It is far enough from here that Keene will not follow, big enough that you can disappear if you need to. And you, she asked quietly, what will you do? I will make sure you get there safe. After that, we will see. The truth was, Yates had not thought beyond getting her to safety. His ranch, his life here, suddenly felt small and empty. He had been content enough before last night, but something had shifted. He had spent 6 years hiding from his past, living a half-life. Maybe it was time for something different. Over the next 3 days, they prepared for the journey. Yates sold off some of his stock to a neighboring rancher, claiming he needed cash for new breeding stock. He gathered supplies, planned their route. Mariana proved herself capable and quick, helping with the work around the ranch, cooking meals, tending to the animals. They fell into an easy rhythm, and Yates found himself enjoying her company more than he wanted to admit. She was smart, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. She had opinions about everything from politics to poetry, and she was not afraid to argue with him when they disagreed. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, sharing stories from their pasts. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about her real father who had been a schoolteacher and had taught her to read and write. About her mother's decline after his death, the move west, the gradual realization that her stepfather was not the man he pretended to be. Yates told her about Missouri, about his family's farm and the way the war had torn everything apart. About the things he had done, the men he had killed, both Union and Confederate. About his mother's letters that had followed him west, full of love and worry and hope that he would find peace. Did you? Mariana asked one night. Find peace. I found quiet, he said. I am not sure that is the same thing. On the third night, they were finishing dinner when they heard horses approaching. Yates was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Go, he said urgently. The barn now. Mariana did not argue. She slipped out the back door like a shadow while Yates moved to the front window. 3 men on horseback were approaching, and in the fading light he recognized one of them as Tom Hayes, the rancher from the saloon. The other 2 he did not know. Yates opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Evening, gentlemen. Something I can help you with. Tom Hayes dismounted and approached, his hands held away from his sides in a peaceful gesture. Evening, Garrett. Sorry to bother you. We are looking for Mariana Keene. Her stepfather is getting more worried by the day and we are checking all the ranches in the area. You have not seen her? No, Yates said, meeting his eyes steadily. Like I said in town, I have not seen anyone. One of the other men, a hard-looking type with a scar on his jaw, spoke up. Mind if we look around, just to be sure? I mind, Yates said, his voice hardening. This is my property and I do not take kindly to people suggesting I am a liar. Tom held up a hand. No one is calling you a liar, Garrett. We are just being thorough. Girl could have snuck into your barn without you knowing. It was reasonable enough that Yates could not refuse without raising suspicion. Fine. Check the barn, but make it quick. The 2 men he did not know dismounted and headed for the barn. Yates felt his heart hammering but kept his face calm. If Mariana had hidden where he told her, they would not find her. But if she had panicked, if she had hidden somewhere obvious, this was all going to go very badly very quickly. The minutes stretched out like hours. Tom Hayes shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I do not like this any more than you do," he said quietly. "But Keene has the whole town stirred up. Half of them think the girl is dead in a ditch somewhere. Other half think she ran off to become a dance hall girl in San Francisco." "What do you think?" Yates asked. Tom was quiet for a moment. "I think there is more to this story than Jacob Keene is telling. I saw the way he looked at that girl sometimes, when he thought no one was watching. It was not the way a father looks at a daughter." Before Yates could respond, the two men emerged from the barn shaking their heads. "Nothing, just 2 horses and some chickens." Yates felt relief wash through him but kept it off his face. Satisfied. "Sorry for the trouble," Tom said, mounting up. "If you do see or hear anything, let someone know. Whatever is going on, that girl deserves better than dying alone in the wilderness." "Agreed," Yates said and meant it. After they had ridden off, he waited a full 10 minutes before going to the barn. He found Mariana squeezed behind the loose board, her face pale and her breathing shallow. He helped her out gently. "You did good," he said. "They are gone." "We need to leave," she said, her voice shaking. "Tonight. If they are checking ranches, it is only a matter of time before someone comes back." Yates knew she was right. "Can you ride through the night?" "I can do whatever I need to do." They packed quickly, taking only what they could carry on horseback. Yates saddled both horses and tied their bedrolls and supplies behind the saddles. He took one last look at his cabin, the home he had built with his own hands, and felt a pang of loss. But when he looked at Mariana, sitting straight-backed on his mare, her chin set with determination, the loss did not seem to matter as much. They left under cover of darkness, following old mining trails that would keep them off the main roads. The moon was waxing toward full, giving them enough light to navigate by. Yates led the way, and Mariana followed without complaint, even when the terrain got rough. They rode through the night and into the next day, stopping only to rest the horses and grab a few hours of sleep in a hidden canyon. By the second day, Yates was reasonably sure they had not been followed. They began to relax slightly, talking more, learning more about each other. Somewhere along the trail, between the mountains and the valley, between the fear and the hope, Yates realized he was falling for her. It was not something he had planned or even wanted. She was young, only 22 to his 31, and she had been through hell. The last thing she needed was him complicating her life further. But he could not help the way his heart lifted when she smiled, the way he found himself watching her when he thought she was not looking, the way he wanted to make her laugh just to hear the sound of it. If Mariana noticed his feelings, she did not say anything. But sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. They camped together under the stars, and he was scrupulously careful to give her space and privacy. But one cold night in the foothills, she had moved her bedroll closer to his without asking, and he had not objected. It took them 5 days to reach Sacramento. The city was huge compared to Sierra City, sprawling and bustling with activity. Yates led them through the crowded streets to a respectable-looking hotel near the river. His friend, Thomas Wright, owned the place, and when Yates walked into the lobby with Mariana at his side, Thomas did a double take that would have been funny under other circumstances. "Yates Garrett," Thomas said, coming around the desk with a broad smile. "I thought you had forgotten about civilization entirely." "Good to see you too, Tom," Yates said, shaking his hand. "I need to talk to you, privately." Thomas's smile faded as he took in Yates's serious expression and Mariana's nervous stance. Of course. Come up to my office. In the privacy of Thomas's office, Yates explained the situation. Thomas listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer as the story unfolded. When Yates finished, Thomas leaned back in his chair and studied Mariana thoughtfully. "That is a hell of a situation," he said finally. "But I can help. I need another girl for the dining room, someone who can read and write and do simple arithmetic. The pay is not great, but room and board are included. You would have your own room, small but private, and you would be safe here. I run a clean establishment and I do not tolerate anyone bothering my employees." Mariana's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You will repay me by showing up on time and doing good work," Thomas said kindly. "Beyond that, you do not owe me anything. Any friend of Yates is a friend of mine." They spent the rest of the day getting Mariana settled. Thomas gave her a small room on the third floor, and the housekeeper found her some proper dresses and shoes. By evening, she looked like a completely different person from the terrified, soaked girl who had knocked on Yates's door a week ago. Yates took a room for himself, planning to stay a few days to make sure everything was settled. But as the days turned into a week, then 2 weeks, he found he could not bring himself to leave. He told himself he was just being careful, making sure no one from Sierra City had tracked them here. But the truth was harder to face. He was not ready to say goodbye to Mariana. She seemed to feel the same way. She had taken to the work at the hotel like she was born to it, charming the guests with her quick smile and sharp wit. But whenever she saw Yates in the lobby or the dining room, her whole face lit up in a way that made his chest tight. One evening, after her shift ended, she found him sitting in the small garden behind the hotel. It was a warm June night, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and river water. She sat down beside him on the bench, not touching but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "You have been here 3 weeks," she said quietly. "Do you not need to get back to your ranch?" "I sold it," Yates said, and the words surprised him almost as much as they surprised her. "Sent a telegram to the neighbor who wanted to buy it. He accepted my price. I figured I did not have much reason to go back." Mariana turned to look at him, her green eyes wide. "Yates, you should not have done that, not for me." "I did not do it just for you," he said, though that was not entirely true. "I did it because I realized I had been marking time out there, waiting for something to change. You knocking on my door that night, that was the change I was waiting for. I do not want to go back to being alone, Mariana. I want more than that now." "What do you want?" she asked, and her voice was barely above a whisper. Yates turned to face her fully, his heart pounding. "I want to stay here. I want to find work, build a life. And if I am being honest, I want to do it near you. I know that is probably too much too soon. I know you have been through hell and the last thing you need is me pushing my feelings on you, but I cannot leave without telling you the truth." Mariana was quiet for a long moment, and Yates felt his heart sinking. He had overstepped, ruined everything. But then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "I hoped you would say something like that," she said softly. "I have been so afraid you would leave. You saved my life, Yates. You gave up your home, your safety, everything to help a stranger. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger. You became the person I think about when I wake up and the last person I want to see before I sleep. I think I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me because I never thought I would be able to trust anyone again." Yates felt something break open in his chest, something warm and bright that he had thought died years ago. "You do not have to be afraid. I would never hurt you, Mariana. I swear on my life." "I know," she said, and she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Yates cupped her face gently, careful not to push too hard, not to ask for more than she was ready to give. But she leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Mariana rested her forehead against his. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now," Yates said, "we take it one day at a time. I will find work, you will keep working at the hotel. We will court properly, do this right, and when enough time has passed, when you are ready, I am going to ask you to marry me." Mariana laughed, the sound bright and free. "I am holding you to that, Cowboy." The next months unfolded like a dream. Yates found work at a freight company, loading and unloading wagons. It was hard work but honest, and the pay was decent. He rented a small room above a print shop, modest but clean. Every evening, he would meet Mariana after her shift, and they would walk through the city together, talking and laughing and learning each other's rhythms. Thomas Wright turned out to be a good friend and a better ally. He kept an eye on Mariana, making sure none of the other employees or guests bothered her. He also kept his ear to the ground for any news from Sierra City. But as the summer faded into fall, it seemed that Jacob Keene had given up his search. Either that, or he had bigger problems to worry about. In September, a letter arrived addressed to Mariana at the hotel. She opened it with shaking hands, fearing the worst, but it turned out to be from Tom Hayes, the rancher who had helped search for her. He had tracked her down through discreet inquiries, and his letter was brief but illuminating. He wrote that Jacob Keene had been arrested for fraud, having been caught doctoring his ledgers and stealing from his customers. When the law had gone through his home, they had found a locked room upstairs full of women's clothing and personal items that did not belong to his late wife. The implications were dark, and several women in the area had come forward with stories of Keene's inappropriate behavior. He was awaiting trial and would likely spend a long time in prison. Mariana read the letter aloud to Yates, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. When she finished, she looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "It is over. He cannot hurt anyone ever again." Yates pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, great sobbing gasps of relief and grief and release. When she finally calmed, he tilted her face up and kissed her forehead gently. "You are free," he said, "truly free." That evening they celebrated quietly in the hotel garden. Thomas had arranged for a special dinner, and he joined them along with some of the other hotel staff who had become Mariana's friends. It was a simple celebration, but it felt momentous. The shadow that had been hanging over them was finally gone. As autumn deepened into winter, Yates knew it was time. He had saved up money from his job, and he used it to buy a simple gold band from a jeweler downtown. On Christmas Eve, after Mariana finished her shift, he asked her to take a walk with him. Snow was falling softly, rare for Sacramento, and the city looked magical in the lamplight. They walked to a small park near the river, and Yates led her to a bench overlooking the water. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Mariana," he said, taking her hands in his. "6 months ago, you knocked on my door in the middle of a storm and changed my life completely. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to care about something beyond just getting through each day. You made me want to be better, to build something real. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me." He pulled out the ring and held it up. "Will you marry me?" Mariana's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling brighter than he had ever seen. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and for a moment the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them, two people who had found each other against all odds. They were married in January of 1877 in a simple ceremony at a small church near the hotel. Thomas Wright stood up as Yates's best man, and the hotel's head housekeeper, a kind woman named Martha, stood with Mariana. It was a small gathering, but it felt perfect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed his bride and felt a completeness he had never known. Thomas had given them a week off as a wedding gift, and they spent it in their own small world, staying in a nicer room at the hotel and exploring the city together as husband and wife. When they returned to work, they moved into a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Mariana continued working at the hotel, and Yates was promoted to freight manager, giving them enough money to live comfortably. The first year of marriage was not without its challenges. They were still learning each other, learning how to navigate disagreements and bad days and all the small complications that came with building a life together. But through it all, they had something solid beneath them, a foundation built on trust and respect and genuine love. In the spring of 1878, Mariana came to Yates with news that made his heart nearly stop. She was pregnant. The fear on her face was immediate and obvious, and Yates realized she was afraid he would not want this, would not be ready. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "This is the best news you could have given me," he said fiercely. "We are going to have a family, Mariana, our family." The pregnancy was not easy. Mariana suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Yates found himself learning to cook and clean in ways he never had before. But he did it gladly, wanting to ease her burden any way he could. As her belly grew, so did his excitement. He built a cradle by hand, working on it in the evenings while Mariana sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Their son was born in November, a cold, clear day when the air smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The labor was long and difficult, and Yates spent hours pacing the hallway outside their bedroom, listening to Mariana's cries and feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. But when the midwife finally called him in and he saw Mariana holding their baby, both of them exhausted but alive and perfect, he felt his knees go weak with relief and joy. "He is beautiful," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. "He looks like you," Mariana said, smiling tiredly. "What should we name him?" They had talked about names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son's small, perfect face, Yates knew. "Samuel," he said, "after my grandfather, Samuel Garrett." "Samuel," Mariana repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, Samuel. We are your parents and we already love you so much." Fatherhood changed Yates in ways he had not expected. He had always thought himself a solitary man, someone who did not need much beyond his own company. But watching Samuel grow, seeing the way Mariana blossomed as a mother, he realized he had been wrong. This was what he needed, what he had been searching for all along. Family, purpose, love. Samuel was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and he was curious about everything. As he grew into a toddler, he followed Yates everywhere, mimicking his walk and his gestures. It made Yates more conscious of his own actions, wanting to be a good example for his son. When Samuel was 2, Mariana became pregnant again. This time she was less sick, more confident. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1881, during a heat wave that had everyone in Sacramento moving slowly and seeking shade. The labor was shorter this time, and when Yates held his daughter for the first time, he felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What about Margaret?" Mariana suggested. "After your mother." Yates felt tears prick his eyes. His mother had been gone for years now, but he still missed her. She would have loved that. Margaret Garrett, Maggie. Their family felt complete with 2 children, Yates had advanced in his job and was now overseeing the entire freight operation for the company. Mariana had stopped working at the hotel when Samuel was born, but she kept herself busy with the children and with volunteer work at their church. They had a good life, a happy life, built on the foundation of that stormy night when she had knocked on his door. They did not talk about that night often. It was part of their story, but it was not the whole story. The whole story was in the life they had built together, in the children they were raising, in the thousand small moments of kindness and love and partnership that made up a marriage. But sometimes, on stormy nights, Yates would pull Mariana close and hold her a little tighter, remembering the terrified girl in the soaking dress who had trusted him with her life. And Mariana would press her face into his chest and remember the man who had given her his coat and, in doing so, had given her a future she never could have imagined. As the years passed, their children grew. Samuel proved to be smart and thoughtful, with a love of books that rivaled his mother's. Maggie was fierce and adventurous, always climbing trees and coming home covered in dirt. Yates taught them both to ride, to shoot, to respect the land and the people around them. Mariana taught them to read and write, to think critically, to be kind but never weak. In 1885, when Samuel was 7 and Maggie was 4, Yates received an unexpected letter. It was from a lawyer in Sierra City, informing him that his old ranch had been put up for sale again. The family who had bought it from him had decided to move back east, and the lawyer wondered if Yates might be interested in reclaiming it. He showed the letter to Mariana that evening after the children were in bed. She read it carefully, then looked up at him with thoughtful eyes. "Do you want to go back?" she asked. Yates considered the question carefully. "A part of me does. I loved that land, loved the work, but I do not want to go back to being alone, and I would not want to subject you to living in the same place where Jacob Keene once lived." "Keene is dead," Mariana said quietly. "He died in prison 3 years ago. I got a letter about it, but I never told you because I did not think it mattered. But if we are considering this, you should know he is gone." Yates studied his wife's face. "What do you want?" Mariana was quiet for a long moment. "I want our children to grow up with space to run. I want them to know what it is like to work with their hands, to build something from nothing. Sacramento has been good to us, but it is crowded and getting more crowded every year. Maybe it is time for something different." They talked late into the night, weighing the pros and cons. By the time the sun rose, they had made their decision. They would go back to Sierra City, reclaim the ranch, and give their children the kind of life that felt increasingly impossible in the city. The move took months to arrange. Yates had to give notice at his job, sell their house, make arrangements for the purchase of the ranch. But by the spring of 1886, they were loading their belongings into a wagon and preparing for the journey back to the foothills. The children were excited about the adventure, though Maggie cried when she had to say goodbye to her friends. Samuel, more reserved, kept his feelings to himself, but Yates saw the excitement in his eyes when they talked about horses and open spaces. The ranch looked much the same as Yates remembered, though a bit more weathered. The cabin needed repairs, the barn needed a new roof, and the fences had fallen into disrepair. But the bones were good, and Yates knew he could make it right again. Sierra City had changed too. It was bigger now, with a proper sheriff's office and a new church. Many of the old faces were gone, replaced by newcomers who had no idea about the scandal that had rocked the town a decade ago. Those who did remember either did not recognize Mariana or were kind enough to keep their mouths shut. They threw themselves into the work of rebuilding the ranch. Yates repaired fences and buildings while Mariana planted a garden and turned the cabin into a proper home. Samuel helped his father with the heavy work, growing stronger and more capable every day. Maggie helped her mother, though she often snuck away to explore the creek and the surrounding hills. The first year was hard, but by the second year they were thriving. Yates had built up a small herd of cattle and had started breeding horses. Mariana had established herself in the community, helping at the school and the church. Their children were happy and healthy, growing up with the kind of freedom and confidence that came from space and security. In 1890, when Samuel was 12 and Maggie was 9, Mariana came to Yates with a surprise. She was pregnant again. They were both older now, Yates 45 and Mariana 36, and they had not planned on more children. But the news filled them both with joy rather than fear. Their third child, a boy they named Daniel, was born in early 1891. He was a calm, sweet baby, and his older siblings doted on him. Samuel, now 13, took his role as big brother seriously, helping to watch the baby whenever Mariana needed a break. Maggie, 10 and fiercely independent, softened around her baby brother in a way that made Yates's heart swell. As Daniel grew, the family dynamic shifted and settled into a new rhythm. Samuel was showing an interest in law and politics, often reading newspapers and debating current events with his father. Maggie had become an accomplished rider and had taken over much of the horse training. Daniel was still young, but he was already showing signs of his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. By the turn of the century, the ranch was prosperous, and the family was happy. Samuel had gone off to San Francisco to study law, writing long letters home about his studies and the exciting changes happening in the city. Maggie, 18 and beautiful, had several young men vying for her attention, but she showed little interest in settling down, preferring to work with the horses. Daniel, now 9, was a constant shadow to his father, learning everything he could about ranching and animal husbandry. One evening in the summer of 1900, Yates and Mariana sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the hills. It was a ritual they had kept for years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Yates reached over and took his wife's hand, marveling at how comfortable and right it felt even after all these years. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Knocking on my door that night?" Mariana turned to look at him, her green eyes still as striking as they had been when she was 22. There was gray in her dark hair now and lines around her eyes, but to Yates she was more beautiful than ever. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You saved my life that night, Yates, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to live it. You gave me love and safety and a family I never dreamed I could have. How could I ever regret that? I gave you my coat and my future," he said, remembering that night. "Turns out it was the best trade I ever made." Mariana laughed and leaned over to kiss him. "I would say we both got a good deal." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear Daniel practicing his reading aloud, stumbling over the longer words. From the barn came the sound of Maggie talking softly to the horses, settling them for the night. And in San Francisco, though they could not hear him, Samuel was building his own future, armed with the values and love his parents had instilled in him. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel graduated from law school and opened his own practice in Sacramento. He married a kind woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Yates and Mariana their first grandchild in 1903, a little girl named Sarah. Maggie eventually fell in love with a neighboring rancher's son, a quiet young man named James who shared her passion for horses. They married in 1904 in a ceremony held at the ranch, and Yates walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes. They settled on a ranch just a few miles away, close enough for frequent visits. Daniel grew into a steady young man who loved the land as much as his father did. When he turned 18, Yates began teaching him the business side of running the ranch, preparing him to take over someday. But there was no rush. Yates, though in his 60s now, was still strong and healthy, and he had no intention of slowing down anytime soon. More grandchildren followed. Samuel and Elizabeth had 2 more children, both boys. Maggie and James had twins, a boy and a girl, born in 1907. The ranch became a gathering place for the growing family, especially during holidays when everyone would come together for huge meals and loud celebrations. Through it all, Yates and Mariana remained the steady center of their family. They had their disagreements, as all couples do, but they had learned long ago how to fight fair and forgive quickly. Their love had deepened over the years, becoming something rich and complex, rooted in shared history and genuine partnership. In 1910, on their 33rd wedding anniversary, Yates took Mariana back to Sacramento for a special trip. They stayed at Thomas Wright's hotel, which he still owned and operated. Thomas was grayer and slower now, but his smile was as warm as ever. They had dinner together, the 3 of them, reminiscing about the old days and marveling at how much life had changed. "You two give me hope," Thomas said, raising his glass in a toast. "In a world that seems to be changing faster every day, you are proof that some things remain constant. Love, family, loyalty. Those things still matter." "They are all that matter," Mariana said softly, smiling at Yates. That night in their hotel room, Yates held his wife close and thought about the journey they had been on together. From that terrifying night in the storm to this moment of peace and plenty, it had been a remarkable ride. There had been hard times, losses, struggles, but there had also been so much joy, so much love, that the hard times seemed small in comparison. "I love you," he whispered into Mariana's hair. "More today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. You are getting poetic in your old age," she teased, but her voice was thick with emotion. "I love you too, always and forever." The years rolled on. Daniel married a sweet girl named Caroline in 1912, and they gave Yates and Mariana 3 more grandchildren. Samuel's law practice flourished, and he became involved in state politics. Maggie and James expanded their ranch and became known throughout the region for their excellent horses. By 1915, Yates was 70 and Mariana was 61. They were grandparents 9 times over, and there was talk of great-grandchildren on the horizon. The ranch was prosperous, the family was happy, and life was good. One evening in late spring, after a particularly full day of work, Yates came into the house to find Mariana standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the sunset. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," she said simply. "This life we have built, our children, our grandchildren. How different everything might have been if I had not found your light in that storm." "But you did find it," Yates said, "and here we are." "Here we are," she agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "Thank you, Yates, for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me all of this." "You saved me too," he said, cupping her face gently. "You gave me a reason to be better, to build something that mattered. We saved each other." They stood there in the fading light, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful together. Outside, their land stretched out in every direction, fertile and productive. Inside, their home was filled with memories and love. And all around them, in Sacramento and on neighboring ranches, their children and grandchildren were living good lives, carrying forward the values and love that Yates and Mariana had worked so hard to instill. It was more than either of them had dreamed possible on that stormy night in 1876, when a terrified young woman had knocked on a cowboy's door. He had given her his coat and, in doing so, had given her his future. And she had taken it and made it something neither of them could have imagined alone. As the years continued, Yates and Mariana grew old together gracefully. They slowed down, as all people do, spending more time on the porch and less time working. But their minds remained sharp, and their love remained strong. They watched their grandchildren grow up, saw some of them marry and start families of their own. In 1920, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary surrounded by what seemed like an army of family. There were children running everywhere, babies being passed from arm to arm, teenagers rolling their eyes at their parents while secretly enjoying the chaos. A long table had been set up outside, groaning under the weight of food everyone had brought. It was loud and messy and absolutely perfect. Samuel stood up to make a toast, his own children grown now and starting their own families. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "You taught us what love looks like, not the easy kind you see in romance novels, but the real kind. The kind that weathers storms and survives struggles, the kind that builds something lasting. We are all here because of the choice you made to choose each other, every single day. Thank you for showing us the way." There was not a dry eye at the table as everyone raised their glasses. Yates looked at Mariana and saw tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "We did all right," he said softly. "We did better than all right," she replied. "We did extraordinarily." Yates Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1923, at the age of 78. He had spent the day working with Daniel and his grandsons, checking fences and moving cattle. He had dinner with Mariana, sitting in their usual spots at the kitchen table, talking about their plans for the summer garden. He kissed her goodnight, told her he loved her, and went to sleep. When Mariana woke in the morning, he was gone, a peaceful expression on his face. The funeral was huge, attended by what seemed like half the county. Yates had been respected and liked, known as a fair man who kept his word and treated everyone with dignity. But it was his family who spoke most eloquently about who he really was. Samuel talked about his father's integrity. Maggie talked about his gentle strength. Daniel talked about his wisdom and patience, and Mariana, though her voice shook, talked about his love. "He saved my life," she said simply. "Not just that night in the storm, though he did that too, but every day after. He showed me what it meant to be truly loved, truly valued. He gave me a family and a home and a purpose. He was my partner, my best friend, my great love. And even though he is gone, the life we built together remains. It lives on in our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. He gave me his future, and I will honor it by living the rest of mine as fully as he would have wanted." Mariana lived another 7 years without Yates, surrounded by her family. She was matriarch to a clan that now numbered in the dozens, and she took her role seriously. She dispensed advice, settled disputes, and loved everyone fiercely. But those closest to her knew that a part of her had gone with Yates, and she was just marking time until she could join him. She passed away quietly in 1930, at the age of 76, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out at the sunset. Daniel found her there, a peaceful smile on her face, the blanket Yates had wrapped around her that first night clutched in her hands. They buried her next to Yates, on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The service was even larger than his had been, attended by multiple generations who had been touched by her kindness and strength. As the sun set on that day, the family stood together around the graves, drawing strength from each other, and from the legacy of love that Yates and Mariana had left behind. Their story became family legend, passed down from generation to generation. The story of how a terrified young woman knocked on a cowboy's door during a storm, how he gave her his coat and ended up giving her his future. How they built a life together against all odds, how they loved each other through everything, how they created a family that endured. The ranch stayed in the family for decades, passed down through the generations. And on stormy nights when the wind howled and the rain lashed against the windows, the family members who lived there would think of Yates and Mariana. They would remember that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the greatest blessings, that sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything. That love, real love, is worth fighting for. And in the town of Sierra City, California, in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, the story of the cowboy who gave a stranger his coat and found his whole future became the kind of legend that reminded people why the West had been called wild in the first place. Not because of violence or lawlessness, though there had been plenty of both, but because it was a place where people could start over, where strangers could become family, where love could bloom in the most unexpected places. Yates and Mariana's love story was proof that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. That courage is not just about facing down danger, but about opening your door and your heart to someone in need. That giving someone else a future might just be the way you find your own. Their legacy lived on in every child who learned to ride on that ranch, in every lesson taught about kindness and courage, in every story told around the dinner table about the night a woman knocked on a cowboy's door and changed everything. It was a legacy of love, pure and simple, and it endured long after they were gone, because some love stories do not end when the lovers die. Some love stories become part of the land itself, woven into the very fabric of family and place. The story of Yates Garrett and Mariana Keene was one of those stories. A story of rescue and redemption, of courage and commitment, of a love that transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the California foothills and the air smells of pine and earth, you can almost feel them there still. The cowboy and his bride, watching over the family they created, the legacy they built, the love that refused to die. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple act of kindness, and that giving someone your coat on a stormy night might just be the first step toward giving them everything else too.